Welcome to the playoff version of Les Fun Guys podcast. For this playoffs, we're actually going to be live video streaming on YouTube after each game, recapping the game and previewing the next one. Our podcast will also be available on your favorite channels, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and more. The Les Fun Guys is a podcast on the National Hockey League with the emphasis on the Habs.
Go Habs, go.
I'm Samir, and my co-host Mark will take you through a quick recap in this episode of the Habs regular season. We're going to preview the Habs versus Toronto playoff first round matchup and obviously give our predictions. And we're going to do a preview of all the other series along with our Final Four and the Stanley Cup final. So Mark, the Habs finished the NHL season with 59 points in 56 games, fourth in the Scotia North, completely botched a big part of the season. We had a bunch of firings. New players came in at the deadline. If you had to recap the Habs season in one word, what would that be?
Well, I would consider it a roller coaster, and La Ronde is closed. Isn't that funny? But it's been a roller coaster season. Tale of two seasons, really. This team got off to a hot start, hot off acquisitions of Edmondson, of Toffoli, of Jake Allen, and they such a great start. We knew it couldn't last, and but they got through a cold spell. And yes, Claude Julien ended up losing his job. Bergevin had to make a move there. They somewhat rebounded afterwards, but they were fighting with inconsistencies the whole year. I think really when you look down to it, they're guys who got paid the most and who are supposed to be leaders on the team. I'm looking at Weber. I'm talking about Price and Nets. I'm talking about Jonathan Drouin. They get paid the most. They didn't deliver the merchandise. So they're responsible for being in this position. But at the end of the day, this team played 25 games in 42 days, which is unheard of. And it showed. They didn't have that energy on most nights. And it probably cost them a third or even a second seed. Their defense hasn't been up to par. Weber's injury clearly hurt them. He's taken a step down from his previous years as a Norris candidate. So it's, and we have to look at Tyler Toffoli, who, I mean, if it wasn't for those goals, timely goals, and beating the Canucks single-handedly on most nights, this team maybe wouldn't even make the playoffs. So we have to thank Jake Allen also for being in that position to help this team. Without him, a goalie like Kincaid, this team wouldn't even be sniffing the playoffs. So Bergevin made some good moves. This has been a very up and down season though. Sam Jam, what do you say?
Yeah, so if I were to recap this season in one word, it's definitely bipolar. On any given night, you did not know which Habs team would show up. I mean, they definitely demonstrated the ability to dominate games, play to a certain identity with speed through each of the three zones. And that got away for them. And I think that has to do with, doesn't have to do with the coaching changes, doesn't have to do with the players, it has to do with the leadership. You had all the guys show that they could play really good games, but they just couldn't all do it in sync. And at times you just were wondering and left scratching your head, what's going on with this season? And I also felt like the season itself, they just didn't have enough, despite the additions that Marc Bergevin made, and good on him for making it. I mean, but at the end of the day, they just don't have that talent. And you said something like they could have finished second or third. I mean, they finished with 11 overtime losses. If you converted half of those, you got an additional 6 points. You convert all of them, you get all 11. And so they're missing that talent and finish. And I really think there's a leadership gap. They're not able to dig deep and figure out, like, how do I come out of games and with a victory, and what do I need to do as an individual player and collectively as a team, so that way we can come out victorious. And it was very gut wrenching to watch throughout the season. I don't know if Dominic Ducharme is the guy. I think that that interim tag I think there's a good reason for that, keeping that interim tag on. And it shows, look at heading into the playoffs. I mean, you got Kotkaniemi, Cole Caufield, and Alexander Romanov, your future of the Habs roster, not starting game one. It's a complete, like, I think it's completely crazy. I mean, I don't think a lot of people, I think if you look around, all the experts around the NHL are all left scratching their heads, wondering what's Ducharme thinking. This team definitely does not have what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. So if you're not going to be putting those guys in to get the experience at this point in time, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice for the future. The other thing that was really inconsistent was Carey Price. I mean, Carey Price is making $10.5 million, and he had a horrible start to the season. And then he comes back, plays pretty well, but then gets left with a concussion and is out. And he said something very interesting, in his postseason press conference. I needed this mental break. I mean, a guy like that who's getting paid what he's getting paid and is supposed to be your best player, should not need the amount of rest that he needs, should not need a backup goalie like Jake Allen. And you're right, Jake Allen was probably the main reason why this team had a chance. They finished with 59 points. The New York Rangers and Dallas Stars, who did not make the playoffs, had more points than them. And they're arguably in probably the worst division in all of hockey, or the weakest. So I don't know if this is a major feat. They just snuck in the last place team. Honestly, they finished with a plus minus differential of -9. Shows that they're missing the scoring, they're missing the schemes, and I think they got to look really hard come playoff time. So heading into the playoffs, Mark, they're facing the best team in the North, arguably expected to go to the Final Four. We knew Toronto has a very deep team. They're very offensively gifted with Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. They got John Tavares, William Nealon on their second line. Jack Campbell is starting to show that he can lead the team in nets. I think this team is well-rounded, and it leads me to believe that the Habs don't have a chance coming to playoffs. What are your thoughts?
I think the Habs do have a chance. Clearly, they're not the favorite; they're the underdog, and they're gonna embellish that. At the end of the day, Ducharme has a plan. His ass is on the line. He may not be head coach next year, so he decided that this team, they can't match up against Toronto's high-end talent. There's 4 super studs there on the top 2 lines. You won't be able to match that. So the only way they're going to win is to play a strong physical game. They're going to have to win the battles. They're going to have to get to the net. They're going to have to play with grit. So I can understand the fan base's reaction that KK, Romanov, Caufield, our future, not playing game 1. But at the end of the day, Romanov, these rookies have been, younger players have been inconsistent. Romanov didn't finish off the season well. He's been on the decline, which is normal. It's understandable in a tight season, but he could benefit from a few days off and resting and watching from the stands. KK hasn't been trending in the right direction. It's been a turbulent season for him. While for Suzuki, he's been progressing better lately, and he's starting to look like the number 1 center. KK doesn't have that momentum right now, certainly not playing with the same type of experience and depth as he did in the bubble last year. And Cole Caufield, well, he's there to score goals. And you could be like, well, the Montreal Canadiens absolutely need goal scorers on their team. The issue is, though, they're on the road. Ducharme doesn't have last change. So he's not there for his defensive soundness. His zone coverage is not his strength. And he's not a physical player. So you got to roll with your veterans. You got to roll with your Tatars. You got to roll with your Armias. The line of Lekan and Evans Byron had a lot of success. We saw it against Edmonton, and they're certainly counting on for that to continue. So you got to go with this lineup and see what happens. But I have no doubt that these players, these young guys, will be back in the lineup.
Mark, I mean, the only chance that the Montreal Canadiens have of beating Toronto is if Carey Price plays out of his mind.
We know
that's the only chance.
100%.
No matter what roster's in front of them. The fact is, you're putting in a guy, keeping out a guy who scored 4 goals in 10 games. Kokanyemi had an amazing bubble. And if you're going to talk about players on the decline entering the season, why is Eric Stahl in there? Why are Joel Armia there? They don't show up. I do think that Jake Evans deserves a spot, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're keeping out key talent. I don't think Merrill has shown anything that Romanov can't do. So to me, it's super surprising. I anticipate that they're going to be back in this series relatively soon. And I don't think that the Habs can stack up defensively with such a slow team. I mean, if you look at each of the lines, besides Tatar, Deneau, Gallagher, which has had a lot of success, the rest of the lines kind of slow down. And you're taking out 3 guys who can move the puck really well and who can have legs underneath them. And they're young. And so they got a lot of energy. I'm surprised to see that we're not playing to our identity. We're not able to get in guys who are going to be key success for us in the long term, not this season, but future seasons. If you ask me what the prediction is, I don't see any chance that Montreal sneaks by or maybe wins a 1 game just out of pride. I think Toronto takes this in 5.
Look, it's playoff hockey. It doesn't have to be pretty. Winning 6-5 or 2-1, it's the same thing. So they decided, and it actually took a note out of the Columbus Blue Jackets blueprint from last season. As you remember, the Jackets beat the Leafs in 3 out of 5 games. And they played that tough style hockey. So that's what they want to do. The issue is the Canadiens don't have the same defense. There's no Seth Jones, no Werenski, no Savard in the back line. For me, the key in the series is Weber. Is he healthy? 100%. We saw him in practice, but what about his hand? He wasn't gripping on the stick. Can he be a force from the point? So that'll be a question. Maybe Caufield will need to come in to help that power play. Either way, Weber is a key pillar for this team. They'll need him to earn his contract and be a leader to help have the Canadiens any chance. I'm optimistic. As a Habs fan, I think Anderson will be the player to watch for this series. Being on the third line with Perry, have some grit there. I think he can score. He could really show that he's a bona fide power winger. And I think he'll have opportunities on the third line. And if you look at the 2 bottom lines, I think it's very even, and Montreal even gets an edge. So the question will be, can we stop those 2 lines? That remains to be seen. That's
You
what I
can
need.
stop them, but if you can't score, you're not gonna win hockey games, right? Carey Price can't score for you either. And I think Josh Anderson is so much faster than Eric Stahl and Corey Perry. He's gonna find himself in the zone before either of them even get close to the red line. I mean, you're just not playing to your strengths, and you're underestimating the strength of Austin Matthews and John Tavares down the middle. I mean, they also have Nick Foligno. They got Riley Nash. Their fourth line is full of experience. Wayne Simmons, Joe Thornton. I don't see how you think that Montreal has a chance. So I think we got to move on to the next series, and we're gonna have to see after game 1 what happens.
And my pick is Montreal in 7. I think they'll find a way to get it done. So I'll be rooting for them either way, though.
So let's move on to the Stanley Cup, the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There are 7 other series. A bunch of them have already started, and you had a couple of games already between some of them. Let's start off with the series that's played 2 games, Washington and Boston. Mark, what are your thoughts? What is your prediction?
Yeah, Washington was looking real good there, taking game 1. Game 2, they were up and heading into the third. Finally, Krejci, Taylor Hall, who had a rough game 1, came back. That was a big blow. Craig Anderson got beat there. Vanchek, their goalie's out. We don't know what's happening with Samsonov. I think Capitals are in trouble. Now they're heading back to Boston. I see Bruins taking this series in 7, though.
So I think you're right with Boston. I mean, they got a lot of strengths, and you can never discount Patrice Bergeron. I mean, he is definitely a Hall of Famer. But I do think with all the additions Washington made, including Chara on the back end, who probably has something to prove against his former team. They also have brought in Manta at the deadline. And I mean, Ovechkin's a winner. He's proven that. He's won a Stanley Cup. TJ Oshie's looking great. I think this team is going to rally. They have all of the pieces that you need to win a Stanley Cup. This team, I think, beats Boston in 7. If
Okay.
we move on to the next series, let's look at Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders. So Pittsburgh surprised all of us, finishing first in the East. They actually, no one really predicted that, and they actually drew the New York Islanders. Islanders come in. Your boy Lou Lamoriello picked up a few players from the Islanders, his former team. And so, they come in now, they win game 1, huge game in overtime. Islanders look like they could compete with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, it's not gonna be an easy series either way. I think we can't forget about Crosby and Malkin. Malkin did miss game 1, so that's a key component of the series. His status. Tristan Jarry obviously did not have a good game 1. He got beat with 4 goals on his glove side. At the end of the day, though, the Islanders, I think they played the right way. They have that playoff hockey. Jean-Gabriel Pajot is a good fit there. You hadn't heard from him the whole season, and then suddenly,
Shows up in the playoffs.
He's a playoff guy. We remember against Montreal, he got that hat trick when he's still with the Senators.
Right.
That stung, but he's that type of player. Their defense is solid. Goaltending, it doesn't get any better with Sorokin, Varlamov. I'm going to say Islanders in 7. I'm going with the upset.
Yeah, I think Jerry let everyone down and let his team down in game 1 with those really bad goals. He did rebound in game 2, and they did come out with a victory, especially led by Crosby, Malkin, Gunsel. Pittsburgh, has this kind of curse in the first rounds. They lost to Montreal last year in the play-in, and they've lost. If they can get out of the first round, I think they got a really strong chance. But I think the additions that New York Islanders made, Kyle Palmieri, Barzal, this team is looking pretty well rounded. I think they have a really good chance of winning. So I give the New York Islanders the series in 6 games.
Nice.
If we move on to the next series in the traditional East, Carolina and Nashville, or Nashville is part of the traditional West, but they ended up merging this season. I look at Carolina, I look at Nashville. They're completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Carolina is expected to compete for the Stanley Cup. They were one of the top 5 teams in the NHL all season. Some would argue the best. So I know, Mark, you're a big fan of the Carolina Hurricanes. I think this is, Nashville was about to sell their entire team at the deadline. They decided to stick it out. They just snuck in the playoffs, passing Dallas. But I don't think they got a chance here. As much as Juuse Saros has been playing exceptional hockey, I still think Carolina, with all their depth, they're extremely dangerous team. They play extremely well together. I see this series in 5 for Carolina.
Yeah, the key is the goaltender for the Carolina Hurricanes, Nedeljkovic. He's really blossomed. He's taken over the role from James Reimer's the third stringer. Mrazek is healthy, and he's not starting. So that's the key, because Carolina has all the pieces on D, leading the way with Dougie Hamilton, and then on offense with Sebastian Aho. Carolina looks good. I think Saros will steal a couple games, but I got to give it to the Canes. I think Djokovic will be fine. Canes in 6.
Canes in 6. So you give Nashville an extra game. I think the series of the first round, if you haven't watched game 1, I'm pleading with you, go back and watch the condensed game highlights on YouTube. You're not going to be disappointed. I'm talking about Florida, Tampa. What a game, back and forth, every single storyline you could want. A hero in Brandon Point coming out with an overtime victory, 2 goals. Stamkos is back. Kucherov is back. They don't look like they missed a beat. They got an all-star goalie in Nets and Vasilevsky. Their back end is stacked. They picked up Savard at the deadline. They also have the Norris Trophy probably candidate in Victor Hedman, and a former Hab first-round pick in Sergachev. Tampa is stacked. However, Florida is also stacked, and they surprised a lot of us. I think they got dealt a bad hand. They got to play against probably the toughest division, against one of the toughest opponents, who just came off a Stanley Cup victory. Barkov looks incredible. Huberto looks incredible. That first game, I can't wait to watch the second one. I think it's the most entertaining hockey I've seen. I just unfortunately, given Tampa's pedigree, I give them the series edge.
Yeah, and it's a real shame that Ekblad is out for a season. They could have surely used him for a Panthers well coached team. Joe Quenneville, Stanley Cup winner, but Kucherov is back, and I would have said Florida in six, but after seeing Game One, Kucherov looks great. Hedman, we were worried, concerned that he needs surgery in the offseason, so maybe he won't be as well. So I'm going with Tampa in six. I just think, after what happened against Columbus a couple of years ago, they're well positioned to not let that happen again, and they're gonna figure out a way to win.
Yeah, interesting. I think they did take game two as well, so they're up 2-0 in the series. Hopefully Florida can rebound. I mean, let's see what happens. Heading back to the north. So our friends on the west coast, we have Winnipeg and Edmonton. Connor McDavid coming off a century season. Uh, Stats comparable to Mario Lemieux. He's dominated on all sides of the ice. He looks like a player that we haven't seen, or we haven't been lucky enough to see in such a long time. I mean, it's just incredible what he's able to do on the ice. What are your thoughts on on Edmonton, Winnipeg, Mark? Who comes out of the north on that side?
It's going to be Oilers in six. Also, at the end of the day, McDavid, Draisaitl, that's too lethal. Now, Edmonton's bottom six isn't that strong, and if you look at the depth of Winnipeg, it is better, and they're going to be getting Nicholas Ehlers back. By the end of the day, the Winnipeg defense is too weak. They lost a bunch of guys, Shara to the Habs, Trouba to the Rangers, Bufflin retired. Those are big holes, and Hellebuck is a Vezina winner, but that's too big a gap against this top tier offensive talent of the Oilers. So I think they're able to get it done. Mike Smith seems to be doing okay, so I got Oilers in six.
Right. So I look at the Winnipeg lineup. I think about balance and depth. Some of the earlier commentary we're giving the Habs as well. This team is stacked across all four offensive lines with balance. Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor. This team is they got the big prize during the season in Pierre-Luc Dubois. So Winnipeg, I think, is a lot better than most people give them credit for. They did have kind of a downhill towards the end of the season. But I think, and you look at in nets, Connor Hellebuck is a real deal. I mean, he's one of Vezina. He is a legitimate number one goaltender in the NHL. That being said, I think Dave Tippett is more of a sneaky coach. I think he's going to do well against a matchup against Paul Maurice. So I give, and if Mike Smith can hold up to the form that he has, which no one really thought that would be the case, and you still continue the play of the D of like Darnell Nurse and Larson, and Connor McDavid kind of outshines, he counts as three forwards just himself, three elite forwards. I think I got to give the edge to Edmonton. So I agree with you, Mark. Edmonton is
12 elite forwards. I would trade 12 Montreal Canadiens forwards for Connor McDavid.
Exactly. Any day. Moving on, if we look at another surprise in the Minnesota Wild against the Stanley Cup favorite from the beginning of the season, Minnesota, Vegas. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough series for the Vegas Golden Knights. Favorite. A lot of people liked them to go to the Final Four. They drew a really tough hand here. They've had a winning record against every team in their division except the Minnesota Wild. And Minnesota plays a real gritty game. And as we saw in Game One, Minnesota should have taken that Game One even earlier, but Fleury saved their ass. It's going to be a real tight series. I think Vegas comes through, but it's going to go 7. And but Pacioretty will have to come back. They're going to need his offensive talent, because I don't think Stone could do it on all by himself.
So I think, Mark, this is going to be the upset of the first round. I think Vegas, maybe their ruck has run out since they've come into the league through expansion and surprised a lot of teams with surprised NHL primarily with a finals run in their first season. Although Marc-Andre Fleury is playing incredibly well, and this team is stacked with talent, especially on the wing. I think Minnesota has proven it this season. I mean, look at their team; they don't really have a lot of known guys. They did have probably the Rookie of the Year candidate in Kirill Kaprizov. Max Zurello has turned it around. Ryan Hartman looks really good. Joel Eriksson up front with next to Marcus Foligno and Greenway. Then you got on your third line, Fiala, Rask, Johansson, and not to forget a tough, very tough fourth line, Nick Bonino, Sturm, and Bustad. And then the resurgence of their decor. I mean, Ryan Suter is looking really good. Matthew Dumba, we know, has been first round pick. Ian Cole's looking good, and their goaltending duo of Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kähkönen. I mean, they can go to either or of the goalies. They proved it all season. I think this is going to be an upset. I think I got Minnesota over Vegas in 6 games.
Wild prediction.
Wild prediction for sure. And then if we move on to the last series preview, Colorado, the Stanley Cup favorites, finishing first in their division, facing off with the St. Louis Blues, who are a couple years away from a Stanley Cup. Mark, do the St. Louis Blues have any chance?
I'm trying to decide who has a bigger chance, the Blues or the Habs, and but I picked the Habs. So, but in this case, it's certainly the Avalanche that Blues don't really have much of a chance. I mean, Joe Sakic built a real winner. When you look at McKinnon, Rantanen, their decor, the only question is maybe in nets with Grubauer, but he's had some years now that he's shown that he's at least a 1B. But I mean, that team in front of him is too good. Blues did win the Cup a couple years ago, but it's not the same Blues team. I mean, it's all about Tarasenko, but he's not the same player that he was. It's just going to be the Avalanche in 5, and that's it.
I think the Colorado is way too good, and they're way too fast. I mean, their top line of Gabriel Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen, I think any NHL team would take that over their top line, even Edmonton. They're that good. This team is stacked. They're built down the middle with McKinnon, Kadri, Jost, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. I mean, their wings, they're strong on the wings. They're strong on D. Cale Makar is going to be a number 1 defenseman, if not already, and maybe get some Norris Trophy votes coming soon. I mean, let's not forget Samuel Girard is also a top prospect, looking like he's fitting in very well in the second pairing with Ryan Graves. You have Devin Toews, Patrick Nemeth and Connor Timmins. And then let's look at even their goalies. I mean, like you said, Grubauer has shown that he can hold his own. This team is just way too good. And I actually think they're going to go a lot further than the first round. I don't think this is even a chance, even though the fact that St. Louis, tried to replace Pietrangelo. I don't think that really worked out as they thought with Torrey Krug. I think that was a bad move there. I mean, David Perron has had a lot of success in St. Louis. He's had a really good season. Tarasenko, like you said, is not where he should be. I don't think St. Louis has the firepower that they need to beat such a stacked team. I think Colorado in 5. And that's just throwing a bone to St. Louis.
So is Colorado part of your Final 4?
Yeah. So if we look at my Final 4 prediction, so I think definitely Colorado gets into that Final 4 position. I think that Colorado is going to beat St. Louis. And then they beat Minnesota, and they're definitely in the Final 4. I think coming out of the North, Toronto, I don't see Montreal taking them down. While I do agree Montreal has a better chance of beating Toronto than St. Louis does beating Colorado, I still think Montreal is not where they need to be. And I think Toronto has paid the price in the playoffs year after year. This could be the year they get out. I don't know if they win the Cup, but they definitely come out of the North, and they beat Edmonton in the second round. On the opposite side, I see Washington coming out of the East. I think Washington beats the New York Islanders. I think they got everything you need. Like you said, there are some question marks, but I think they'll figure out a way to make it happen. And then finally, I mean, Carolina Tampa. That's probably going to be an incredible series if Tampa wins and Carolina wins, which we think they will. Um, I just think that Tampa has all of the tools they need and the experience, both and young fresh legs, and you can never discount the fact that their stars come out and play every game. So I think the final four is definitely Tampa, Toronto, Washington, and Colorado. And then from there, I give it up to, I say that, I mean, I don't, I guess if you have to rank them that way, I don't know how they re-rank
By
particularly with that, but
standings of the regular season.
yeah, I understand that it's the standings of the regular season, but I don't know. I don't have the final numbers, so I don't know how they would play each other. But I do think that Colorado comes out victorious. I think they're stronger than all the other teams. Tampa could repeat, but I think this could be Colorado's year.
Yeah, I think I see Colorado going into finals. I see them playing Carolina. I'm picking Carolina to win the cup. I think this goaltender they have is good enough, and their defensive core. I could see Dougie Hamilton winning MVP. I really like them. I've mentioned many times, and they've proved me right so far. I think the Islanders will come out of East. They play that type of physical playoff hockey that tends to work, but playing Boston maybe will be a challenge, but I think they could get it done. And then coming out of the North, well, I did pick Montreal to beat Toronto, and I would have liked Toronto to go to the Final Four, but since I picked the Habs, I don't think the Habs will actually get past the Oilers. So I think McDavid is just going to rip up the North, and we'll see him in the Final Four, but it won't be enough to beat either Colorado or Carolina. So that's my predictions.
Well, that wraps up our first podcast playoff preview. We'll be back right after game one, recapping the first game, seeing how we did with our predictions and our thoughts, and hopefully you're right, Mark. I'd love to see the Habs win. I'd love to see them take it to Toronto. I'm a Habs fan at heart, so that's what I'm going to be cheering for them. But we'll see what happens, and then we'll definitely come back and give our previews and predictions of Game 2, and catch all of you up on the rest of the NHL. So stay tuned. Go Habs, go!
Let's go.